I'm at the point where like, any ad hoc email that I send, and I don't know why I haven't like built this as a better process. Chances are I start writing an Outlook, get to a point where I'm like 80% finished with the email, or I've 100% finished it, and I'm like, I don't like it. Copy and paste it because I hate Copilot. Just canceled that. Copy and paste it, and then ask Claude or Perplexity, like, make this better. And like it already knows enough about my business and stuff and different things, but make it better. And then I'm like, oh, that's way better. Okay. I put it back. So it's all the content like I wrote, but I'm like, could you just polish this up? Because I'm all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. I think we're all doing that these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've noticed they're just getting a lot more concise and succinct. And I'm like, this is great.
It's true. Yeah, it's very rare that I'll plug it into like a ChatGPT or Grok or something, and then I get a response and I'm like, no, I actually wrote it better. But I would say 90% of the time they write it better.
Yeah. It's just like, you can't ask them to draft something from nothing. You won't get what you want.
I do have them do the first draft and then I modify it. And usually the first draft is quite good. I mean, I guess maybe the difference is it has to know everything about your data, right? Like I'm assuming you have all your data connected. Like I guess I'm talking about Knapsack here. I'm using Knapsack.
I'm just going to say you're using this really like powerful, great tool called Knapsack. So
yeah,
that's
yeah. So I mean, I think it's like different. Even with the cold start, you can say like write an email to Larry and James confirming this, and it'll like auto draft the email and just put it in there, and that's all I have to write, and it'll actually pull in all the context. So
Nice.
I think that's going to be the future. I mean, I've started to do that, and I think like that whole back and forth is just way too onerous. I saw that ChatGPT has that little like email little widget now where you can basically send the email from there. Do you guys ever do that?
I haven't done it yet. No, but that's a good point that we should talk about on this podcast, because I've had advisory firms contact me and ask me if we are archiving ChatGPT yet, because they're pushing emails out through.
Well, that's a really good point.
And I was just like,
and then there's also the question of at what point will the SEC ask for your ChatGPT history? Yeah. Well, why don't we get started?
All right, let's do it. So I guess in that case, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heynen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Well, welcome everybody. We're here with another episode of AI for Advisors podcast with myself, James Cantwell, and my co-host, Mark Heynen. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Enjoying my week.
I'm going to need more than that, Mark.
Yeah, I know you really do. I mean, I've been enjoying, we talked about this a little bit pre-show. I've been enjoying not writing a lot of emails. So I don't often plug Knapsack, but we really turned a corner with
You don't?
No, I really don't. But we turned a corner with actually just being able to write stuff in and draft emails from scratch, pulling in all work context, which has been pretty awesome. And we've talked about email a lot in this show. I think it's sort of the bane of our existence, and we're probably going to talk about it on this show. But anything that makes that whole process easier, I'm a big fan of.
Any chance where I get to rip email apart, I'm down for. So, well, here let's quickly just get into some quick introductions. So today we're talking with Larry Shumbres, CEO and founder of Archive Intel. We're going to talk a little bit about why compliance might be the most important AI use case in wealth management, and why so many firms learn the lesson the hard way. And I'm gonna dive right into something before I ask Larry his first question. Truly welcome you to the show, Larry. So
thank you for having me. Thanks, James. Thanks, Mark.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
We're honored to have you. So before we dive into asking you some specific questions, I just want to set the tone that, compliance, or I shouldn't say compliance, the SEC and, allotting some fines for compliance has definitely been on the rise. Now, I'm not quite sure any of these firms were brutally injured by this, but I'm going to list off some numbers for our listeners. There were $63 million in fines to these 12 firms, including $12 million at Blackstone, $11 million to KKR, $10 million to Charles Schwab, $8.5 million to Apollo, $8.5 million to Carlyle, 8.5 million to TPG, and so on and so forth. I'm sure they're all hurting after those fines. But for most of the investors or advisors listening to our show, it's really a sign of what's to come, right? They're making a little bit of noise. They're letting you know that communicating off channel, these things are not acceptable, which is why it's so great that we have Larry on today talking about Archive Intel and his platform. So, Larry, let me kick it over to you and just start with a question around timing. So you guys launched in 2024. The SEC's off-channel enforcement campaign, at least by AI for advisors, standards, looks like it started in late 2021. By the time you launched, Goldman, Citi, and Bank of America had already paid over $1 billion in fines. So I think my first question is, what took so long? And then let's get into your origin story a little bit.
Yeah. So prior to Archive Intel, I had a company called Totem Risk, which is a risk tolerance solution where we were competing with Riskalyze and Infinimetrica at the time. We sold the company in 2020 to a company out of Boulder called Tiffin. I had a 1-year stint with them. During that 1 year, I was talking to a lot of my clients about what other pain points do you have around risk or compliance or anything like that? And I just kept hearing the grumblings of the old legacy products that were out there for 20 years saying they're just old, they're outdated, there's no AI, they're difficult to use, they're expensive, etc. So after speaking with a lot of advisor firms, compliance consultants, after 2022, 2023, and consulting with some other compliance companies, I decided, all right, I have enough information to build something better, right? Build a better, smarter global relay. And that's what we did.
Interesting. I'm curious. This enforcement action that we're talking about, it was about a year ago, right? Almost exactly a year ago. And like James was talking about, we saw KKR partners setting phones to auto-delete messaging. We saw Blackstone MDs using WhatsApp for client advice. And I'm just curious, you've been deep in this world. Is this willful noncompliance, do you think? Or are the existing archiving tools just bad? Like where does the bad intent and just the bad tooling start? How do you think of that from a product vision point of view?
Now, when you look at some of the old legacy products out there that were trying to capture texting and WhatsApp, they just weren't doing, it just wasn't good technology, right? Especially when it came to WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp is very unique, dual encrypted. You either have to reverse hack it or work with Meta, who owns WhatsApp right now, right? To gain access to their APIs and work with them. And they're not going to work with anybody that's small, right? You have to either know somebody at that company, or you have to be big behemoths to be able to build and afford building into that app. It's almost like, LinkedIn, you have to go through a full due diligence process. They have to approve you. They put you on their compliance partner website. And then you have to pay for it, right? It's not free. So it's not like anybody could just go do these things and build them. And when you build into any of these apps, whether it's LinkedIn or WhatsApp or texting for iMessage direct, you have to have like a dev person or engineer dedicated solely to that app, because they're constantly changing the privacy policies. And every time a privacy policy comes up, like I even did this yesterday with our team with Facebook and Instagram. So Meta's like, hey, you have to, for your app that's on our store and everything, you have to update this, to abide by our policies. And has anything changed at your firm? This is what's changed here. If this is, out of compliance, you need to notify us and we'll review it. And then you have to submit that form and then they review it again. So, whether it's WhatsApp or LinkedIn or any of these apps, it's very difficult. It's not like somebody could just plug them in and do it. So these old legacy products that have been around for a long time, I don't think they had the awareness to know that these policies were constantly being updated and the APIs were constantly being updated to make sure that they were working properly. And that's where I see, a lot of the fines came in. But I also think a lot of the fines came in because people were using WhatsApp and the firms just weren't archiving it. They just weren't doing it.
Yeah.
Or iMessage or texting.
One of the things that I think about is obviously there's the technology aspect, there's the firm itself, right? And their particular policies. But when we think about our business, this is, we say it time and time again, it's a relationship business, right? Like pretty much any industry where you have those sort of relationships, you're likely giving out your mobile number. You're using that. The phone likely may have something that's archiving or doing the conversations, or it might not. But the thing is they now have your phone number, and now so it's like, well, don't text me. That medium, yes, you have the number, but no, you can't use it for this purpose, is a challenging thing. And so I was talking to a firm the other day doing a discovery, a new client, and that was kind of one of the questions I asked, which was, how are you communicating? What are the different mediums? And I asked specifically about like texting or WhatsApp, Telegram, these different things. And they're like, yeah, occasionally we get texts from clients. We usually just, reroute them to email. And so we'll pick up the conversation from the email. We'll just say, we'll send you an email on that. And then they pick it up from there. So like they have this workflow now where they reroute them. And I'm like, why?
That's brutal. As a
Right? Like
customer,
just
that
don't.
feels
Like let's
so
just
brutal.
make it compliant. Right?
Yeah.
And make this so you can communicate that way, because that's how your clients want to communicate with you. So it's client driven sometimes. So I kind of understand where we were a few years ago and some of the gaps, but with platforms like yours and some of the others that also capture the data, I mean, is there any real valid reason to just not enable text communication at this point and just be sure to archive it?
Yeah, there isn't any excuse, or you shouldn't have workarounds or workflows like that. And you shouldn't be carrying around two phones. It's like we took a huge step back. I know I've been around a while. You could tell from my hairline in the industry, where I remember back when I started, right out of college with IBM, I had a BlackBerry in like a regular, I don't even know if it was a flip phone or just some type of phone, right? Where you couldn't do much with either. Uh, Carrying around two was just like crazy. And then you had your laptop, and then the iPad and iPhones came out. And it was a little crazy. And now today you see, in 2026, advisors and financial employees walking around with two phones. I was on a plane, I fly often, but maybe a month ago, and I knew it was a financial advisor sitting next to me because he had two phones. And he's sitting there and he's going back and forth the whole time on the plane, like click, texting here and then texting here. And I finally tapped him. I said, "You're a financial advisor, right?" He's like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" I'm like, "You have two phones." And he's like, "It's awful. This is terrible." He's like, I work for, I'm not going to say the name of the firm, but we have to have two phones. They won't let us text here. So I have to text texting my friend here. Then I have to tell him, like, if we're talking stocks, we have to text over here. I'm
Did
like,
you close
yeah,
the deal
you should
before
use
you
our
before you
product.
guys landed? How did that net out?
Yeah. So he was like, he could not believe it. I even showed him on my laptop and on my phone. I'm like, you could use your own phone number, just whitelist your clients here, and it'll only capture your client text. And he was like, "Why doesn't everybody have this?" I'm like, "Well,
Everybody should.
they should." And that's one of our leading products at Archive Intel, is capturing direct text from iMessage, your Android or Android phone or WhatsApp, because they're tired of the two phones, or they're tired of having another app on their phone with a different phone number, and it's just trying to make it work. And, I came up with the idea based on a meeting I had in New York City, because I knew all the fines were out there, but I'm like, well, why isn't this working? And I won't mention the name of the firm. They were fined $50 million. And I'm sitting down with the chief compliance officer and saying, we had a separate app with a separate phone number. He said that didn't work. No one was using it. He said, then we distributed a separate phone number with a separate phone with a separate phone number. He's like, 6 months later, the SEC comes in and reviews everything, finds out that they're not using that separate phone. Then they got fined $50 million. So he's like, if you could figure out, Larry, how to take this existing phone and just, capture our client contacts in text, he's like, you'd have something. So I went back and worked with our developers for 3 or 4 months, and we figured it out.
I think that's great. I mean, like, there's a term, and I certainly didn't coin it, but it's a very simple one: friction, user friction, right? It's going to limit adoption every time. And especially when it's something that's compliance, you don't want to do it. It's something that makes interacting with your clients. Before this call started, the podcast started, we were talking about like replying to emails and the speed of the replying and that sort of thing. Anything that's going to add friction and slow you down is going to cause you to not adapt something. And so that's the thing, like they're on their phone, that's what they're using. And the thing that I think our industry forgets a lot is that there's two parties here. There's the advisor and there's the client. And the friction applies on both sides. And so when the client texts you, like we talked about earlier, you can't add that friction of let me message you back over here on my other phone, or let me, we talk stocks on this phone and we talk fun on this phone. Like that, that's where things really
And
become a challenge.
it's only going one direction, right? People are asking to have more communication channels rather than less. So it's going to feel more and more awkward over time, especially with the younger generation, to the extent that's a market. I mean, I did notice, Larry, you had some pretty big claims on your product. I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit for our listeners. They're impressive. You said Archive Intel reduces back office of fit tasks by about 95%, and 99% reduction in false compliance flags. Well, first of all, are those accurate? And I would love to a little more color on how you achieve that.
So one of the first issues I saw when we were building out like a better solution for archiving e-coms was the fact that everyone was putting in these, what they term lexicons, which are just keywords or phrases to capture so it gets flagged in an email or text or social media if somebody says, I guarantee this return, or this is a sure winner, right? Or you have like somebody angry. So they call them these lexicons. So advisors or compliance officers put in like 50 to 100 keywords and phrases to say, all right, flag any communications with these. The problem is, if you look at every disclosure in the financial industry, it says, we do not guarantee future returns based on past performance, right? So what happens when you're just looking at keywords and not contextual sentences is you get flag false positives. And that was the biggest pain point I saw right away, was that you had these compliance firms that were spending hours, days, weeks reviewing all the flag false positives in their compliance tools. With AI, we were able to take I could go real deep, but we first were like, well, let's just build our own SLM. So our small language model, test that, and then, see if that'll work. So we did. And the outcome wasn't great. We were looking at like 65%, 70% at best. Then we switched over to Llama and used a large language model there. And we saw an increase up to about 80%. Then we went to like Llama 3, tested that more, used AWS's Bedrock models, added our own prompts, start testing the data more. We got it up into the 90%. And we were in around 95% up until 95 to 99%, reducing this flag false positives up until about a month ago, when we then tested Llama 4 Maverick. Again, looked at using some of the same AWS Bedrock models, but added a few more, and then added more prompts, did some testing, and then we saw a 10% reduction again. So now we're definitely seeing well over 99% reduction on those emails. And then we tested it with a client. We tested with the prospect. So a prospect came to us and said, we had 2 million emails in like 1 month, 200,000 were flat, false positives, right? They're outsourcing them to a team in India, which is a huge compliance risk right there. I don't know. I don't care how you're sending them to the team in India. I think that's compliance issue number one. But number two, just the fact that you have 200,000 flag false, just emails alone, not text or social media that you have to review, is just insane. It's mind blowing. So when we ran our AI model through, it reduced those flag false positives by 99%. So they had less than 200 emails to go through. They were just blown away.
That's a pretty stellar.
Yeah. And I think we could get that down even more so over time. And now with those same models, that for SEC, the SEC likes to see like a 15% random review done, at least on like a quarterly basis, depending on the size of the firm. So we added an AI agent that you could schedule, tell the agent, okay, I want to run a random review every day or week or month, with, across all these channels across my firm, and go. And it'll not only run it every, day, week, or month, but it'll complete that review for you. And if it finds anything that's out of compliance, it moves it to an escalated folder. So again, a huge time savings for the backend. So there were like two big pain points that I saw outside of the texting that we were like, let's do this. And then we found out like, okay, the texting thing's not working for everybody.
That's amazing. Well, I have a very nerdy question. I noticed you're talking about using Llama, using open source models. I know more recently they have not performed as well on the leaderboards versus, Claude and Gemini and those kind of models. Is there a reason why you feel you need to use open source models, or was that just where you wanted to get started?
It was easier to where we wanted to get started. It was less expensive. And you're right, like Lamda 3.0 worked well. We tested 3.1, that did not work well. So we never upgraded to that. And then 4 came out. We tested 4 and 4 worked really well. It's almost like, was it AWS or somebody that had like their first rendition of AI and it didn't work well. I don't know if it's AI or Google. And then, they just came out with a new edition and now like everyone's running to it. I can't remember
Yeah.
exactly which one it was. It's one of those
Yeah.
bigger firms that wasn't really diving deep into AI.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you use Bedrock. We use Bedrock as
interesting.
well. There's some really great features that Bedrock has in terms of ephemeral sort of data capture and sort of control, but it does not always include the latest models. I noticed it doesn't have Gemini yet, for example, and that's a bit of a constraint. But it does have Llama. Has a lot of Llama in there.
Larry, sorry.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to pivot back to something Larry said earlier, so finish your thought.
Yeah. I was going to go on to something new, so why don't you go ahead and go?
So, Larry, what I wanted to ask is you mentioned the SEC wanting you to like do this check for like 15%. One of the questions I have is like, do you think the regulatory environment's going to need to adapt or will be able to adapt as platforms like yours become more prevalent, right? Because that's a rule that I think is in place because we don't have the proper tools. And so that's something that they're saying, well, if you flag this percentage, it's a good spot check, right?
Right.
Essentially. And so that spot check seems silly if the right platform's in place. It almost seems like an opportunity to incentivize certain firms to work with vendors like yourself if the SEC was willing to, or FINRA was willing to relax some of those requirements. I mean, you solve for it anyway, right, with the automation.
Right.
But I'm almost kind of wondering if there's a partnership and approved, a pathway to be like, we're an approved compliance vendor and, you don't have to do these things anymore. I mean, technically they don't have to because you're doing it for them, but.
Yeah, I wish, we all know from our, Series 7 days that the SEC or FINRA do not approve anything, right? They just review it. So it's like, and I think it was FINRA used to have a fintech, like a platform where you could
Like a sandbox? Is that what you're talking about? Like where you
not
can
even a sandbox where they would look and they say, oh yeah, we don't approve it, but here's a fintech product or a regtech product that you should use, right? They got rid of that a number of years ago. I'm not sure why, but I don't think that was really their focus. But yeah, when it comes to the SEC and FINRA and AI, and I think this is a critical point to make, is that we're going to help firms reduce the time that they spend on this and save them a lot of time and money where they could focus on other compliance issues. We could also help them save money by not having to outsource it, period. Like they should be able to do this internally quick and fast so they don't have to hire more people or outsource it, right? But at the end of the day, you still need the human. And the SEC and FINRA are still going to require that someone did review what AI reviewed and say, okay, that looks good. We approve that. If they don't, I think that's going to be an issue going forward.
Yeah, I want to talk about the SEC. Paul Atkins, avid listener of our show, always going into the comments and trash talking. Yeah, I mean, what do you think is going to happen with meeting notes and transcripts going forward? A lot of people are sitting on the sidelines from AI note takers because they're worried about the books and records implications of meeting notes. I know, you're not giving legal advice here on the show, but I'm just curious if you could project into the future. What do you think will happen over the next 2 to 5 years? Will we get clarity from the SEC? Where do you think they will likely net out?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question because when that first happened, when I saw the explosion of AI note takers, I was like, all right, they need to archive this. Like this is an issue. And no one was talking about it and no one still talking about it, which is
I would say
good
though, a
and
lot
bad.
of them are pushing the notes to the CRM. At least
Yeah, but then there's the recordings and the videos, and there's debate about whether those should or should not be considered books and records,
Yeah,
right?
fair enough.
And yeah, and then some people are worried about saving the transcripts, but then they're worried about deleting the transcripts. So there's a lot of back and forth on that.
Yeah, I would say this. I don't think, you could get ahead of it and say, all right, I want to work with Archive Intel and archive Zox or Jump or Zeppelin, any of them, that Zoom, any of those note takers, a ton of, even Ultras has it, right? Or just wait to see what the SEC and FINRA says, right? Because even today, the SEC and FINRA do not require you to archive and record any voice, right, or video. Yeah, if you transcribe it, yeah. We've had clients call us and say, well, we have all these podcasts. We transcribe when we want to at least put them in a vault or archive them somewhere in case the SEC does come back and say, but there's no rule or regulation around that says that they have to record a voice or a note taker just yet. So it'll be, I think it's coming. I think it's coming along with, the fact we're going to see, I think the next fines, depending on the administration, will come around like note taking. They'll have to put in a rule or regulation around how, if it's with a client, that's considered communication. Voice, I don't think they're really going to get the voice. It's more like EU GDPR. Like they're very strict over there versus here in the US. Everyone thinks the SEC is so strict. Go to Europe. I mean, it's 10 times worse over in Europe. Like you have everything's locked down.
Yeah.
If you want voice, everything has to be recorded for record keeping rules.
And so you think with transcripts, you think transcripts are going to be considered books and records and people are going to have to hold on to them if they do save them? Or do you think they'll be allowed to delete them? How will that work?
I think eventually they will, but right now they're not, right? There's nothing that says, there's no rule or regulation in the SEC that says that you have to, do that with FINRA or SEC. Yeah, there might be a state registration rule from one state, but I haven't heard anything around that.
That'll be a nightmare if that happens.
It is client communication, right? It's client communication. Yeah, and I see like even more apps out there. People keep calling about other apps outside of just the note takers, but we've seen a big uptick in TikTok, Reddit.
I was going to ask about TikTok.
Substack, right?
Yeah.
So all these apps that advisors are using, especially younger advisors, they're communicating with clients through them. So they need to archive it.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of new data sources, what do you advise your clients about their ChatGPT history, their chatbot histories, to archive or not to archive?
I would say archive it. Yeah.
Interesting.
And if anything, it's CYA, right? Just why not? Like if you already have it, archive it, put it in a vault, put it somewhere, stick it in cold storage in AWS somewhere. I don't know, right?
Yeah. You have to be very careful, by the way, because if you sign up for ChatGPT Enterprise and then you pause that subscription, this happened to a friend of mine, it basically deletes all of your previous history. You have to sign up again to get it back, but you have to be a little careful with that.
Interesting. I can understand if we end up down the path of archiving, your chats. But to me, I think the challenge is that a lot of that is research. It's like having to show your work. Like if it's writing an email and I capture the email, cool. Does it really need the chat that I had back and forth on how I composed it? Right? If there was back and forth, that seems unnecessary. If I'm doing some sort of financial plan and I'm using, hopefully you're not using ChatGPT to build client financial plans, but let's assume it was one of the sources of data. As long as I capture like the rationale for the plan, is the chat really necessary? Like maybe you could argue more so in that case, but I don't know that the sort of show your work, the conversation with, some LLM is really necessary. It seems over the top in most use cases, but I could argue the other direction for specific ones.
Yeah, I could see your point, and I would say it may be a little bit over the top when it comes to some chats, like even Zoom chat, which we do archive within like a Zoom meeting. Do they need to archive it? Compliance officers will say yes. Compliance consultants will say yes. Advisors will be like, really? Why? No, but I've had advisors call me and say, hey, we use Timeline within Black Diamond. Can you archive that for us? So we reached out to Black Diamond. We have the API and we have it on our roadmap. But I think it's more like, let's have it instead of not have it in case they ask for it. Right?
Yeah, archive it all. I think, go ahead, James.
Let me ask you a question. So like a lot of and I legit don't know the answer to this. So maybe it'll lend towards something your product does, or maybe it won't. But, a huge portion of the AI tools that most people think of when they're thinking about AI tools are probably not on the compliance side, frankly. They're thinking about the AI chats and how do I comb through so much data faster? How do I get insights? How do I enhance my creativity by using some thought partner or something else that has some skills I don't have. But if you're archiving all the data, that's a pretty good source to mine for insights and information. So is there anything that you're doing now or on the roadmap to use that data in a different
So
capacity? I
the
mean, it's
Intel
almost like
side,
your own little data lake.
yeah, the Intel
I
side of Archive Intel.
I love that you brought that up because we've been working with MileMarker to push data to MileMarker, which is overlay on top of Snowflake, huge data lake. I think that's the biggest that's what excites me today more than just the archiving part. And I think that's the people the firms that understand data lakes and the data that's there in utilizing AI agents. That's where I see, yeah, at the end of this year, really middle to end of 2027, that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck is you're going to be able to take and archive the data through Archive Intel. We're going to have our own data lake soon, or we'll just push the data to the client's data lake. They could use their own AI agents. We could build in RAG bots and guardrails around how they're pulling the data out. And you can just talk to it, say, hey, show me all the texts from the last 3 months for James and Mark that say the word crypto in it. Boom, it's there. And then be like, all right, did they say anything around trading it through Coinbase? Boom, right there. Like you don't have to do searches, filters, anything. It's just boom, 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 right there. That's where, and I'm so happy that you asked me that question because that's what really gets me excited is like, what else could we do with this? Like, where could we make it even more efficient, more and better, and get more data and information out of what we're doing today? And you hit the nail on the head with data lakes. I think that's it.
Well, I mean, that's every builder, right? Like as you're building something that collects data, regardless of the purpose, you start being like, well, wait, when I have this in aggregate, what else can I learn from it? How else can it be leveraged? And I mean, clearly there's huge industries made out of just data aggregation. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
these are
there's so much potential as soon as you basically start incorporating all this data, and you're incorporating more data sources, I think, than most other tools, considering you're looking at archiving people's WhatsApp, LinkedIn messages, et cetera. So it's going to be, there's this saying that within AI, having access to proprietary data is going to be the only sustainable differentiator because all the other elements of the stack are going to be commoditized over time. And so, I mean, I guess this is a great test case of that. I did want to ask you a little bit about the compliance industrial complex. I mean, you obviously are going up a little bit against Microsoft here, building compliance features into Teams, or Google rolling out enterprise archiving and workspace. And you obviously have, made quite a bit of headway. I see here 500 firms, 7,000 users. Where do you see this going? I mean, and then I obviously Smarsh and Global Relay are basically, have AI roadmaps themselves, are layering AI on top. Where do you see the advantage of building AI native versus, in the case of Smarsh and Global Relay, like a legacy firm trying to implement AI on top of their existing solution?
I love this question, Mark.
Thank you. It took a while to get there.
Yeah, so I'll start with like Microsoft and Google. Google acquired a archiving solution maybe 15 years ago. Tried to implement it, threw it out there, kind of just, spent a lot of money on that acquisition and just kind of threw it away, right? Didn't do much with it. They are archiving Microsoft and Google, they'll archive things, but they don't, there's no way to review, capture data, look at any flags or lexicons, anything that's out of compliance within the data that they're capturing. So I don't think they're ever going to get into the space. I don't think it's really that attractive to them yet, because they already are capturing a lot of that data on the email side. And the TAM and the dollars probably just don't add up for them to jump into archiving and compliance. For Smarsh and Global Relay, because they're so big, and Smarsh is owned by K1, a private equity firm. Global Relay is for sale now, that we hear through investment bankers out in PE firms. So it'll be interesting what happens with Global Relay after they're acquired.
Go out and buy it. Get it now.
Yeah, somebody's going to buy it. Pretty big penny that they're asking for it, right? But what we saw at the FINRA conference last year is Smarsh and Global Relay came out with generative AI, and I was like, oh, do they know what they're doing? Like, What financial firm is going to say, yeah, commingle my data with everybody else's data and learn from it? So I think they're just not, their finger's not on the pulse of the industry right now. And I think that's a big miss by them. Number one. And number two, the firms, at least that we're competing with them every day, about 80% of our new business comes from financial advisor firms that were already using Smart and Global Relay, right? So they've tested the AI and they just said it just doesn't work, right?
Mm.
Where firms like us, we could grow faster, we could test more, we could test across multiple platforms of AI and data sets and models a lot faster and quicker because we're smaller, right? We're these Smart and Global Relay, great ideas, great companies, have been around for a long time. They're global, they're big, and they're in multiple industries. They're not just in finance, right? So they're in healthcare, government, education, et cetera. So a lot harder for them to make those changes versus somebody like us.
Yeah, I think the financial services specialization, or frankly, any sector specialization, makes a pretty big difference, especially when you're talking about going up against, you know, monster enterprise global entities, right? They aren't, people think of them as unstoppable because they seem to have unlimited cash and resources. But the reality is, like, they're trying to address too many user profiles, too many user needs, and they just have to fit the masses. And so that's never, they're not really your competitor when you specialize and your clientele is in that segment.
No, it's not. And our focus right now is the SMB market. It's the RAs, the asset managers, smaller broker dealers, larger broker dealers. Now that we've been around for almost 2 years, we're growing fast. We're adding more connectors, more features and functionality. We also launched an AI marketing review tool on our roadmap. We want to add attestations and trade monitoring with the AI overlay. I feel like now we could compete at that higher level, and it'll be interesting over the next few years how we compete with Smart and Global Relay for some of those enterprise deals.
Yeah. How do you see this market developing? I mean, actually, I was just seeing that Commissioner Hester Pierce called the SEC's off-channel enforcement actions a cash cow during a congressional hearing. That's actually pretty wild. So I can see a lot of backlash, and I can see in a future administration maybe pushback on bringing down enforcement actions. I mean, where do you see this going in general? Do you see it being an increasing need, or do you see now as being a bit of an anomaly?
Yeah, I kind of agree that was a little bit of a cash cow kind of going out there. There was a low hanging fruit to target all these financial companies over texting because it was new, something that they really weren't tracking or capturing, right? So I think they took advantage of that. Is that going to stop them in the future? Probably not. There's going to be different rules, different regulations, like the newer one that's out that I think is quite interesting around AI marketing rule around performance, right? Is it gross of fees? Is it net of fees? Like how do we, what is the SEC looking for? There's nothing specific that says that in the rule. So is it going to slow down? If it's not texting, it's going to be something else, right? So compliance is one of those things that's not going to go away. If anything, like I said, GDPR rules are much more stringent than what we see here in the US with the SEC. With more apps, more technology coming out, I think there's going to be more insight and more attention to what advisors are using out there when it comes to technology.
Can things get more real time? I mean, I think there's like this vision that maybe while you're on a call, you start saying something and you can have a heads up sort of notification that this might be, getting into violation territory, or you might be drafting an email. Exactly. You may want to reconsider. Or you can imagine while you're drafting an email, you effectively have some kind of, something reviewing those drafts before you even hit send. It seems like the compliance regime is largely reactive, and you can imagine it becoming a lot more proactive. It seems like that's a direction that
Mark, what's that movie with Tom Cruise where, like,
Minority Report.
yeah, Minority Report.
Yeah.
They start arresting you for crimes you're gonna commit.
The compliance officer comes over and says, "Hey, I think you're thinking about doing something wrong. We should have a talk."
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mark. I see that happening in the future where you'll be typing an email and it comes up and says, "Hey, you can't send this." It's almost like if you're. So I'll backtrack a little bit. We had that and we pulled it down where
Why'd
it
you pull it
was
down? That's interesting.
advisors didn't like it. It was driving them
Really?
crazy. Yeah, so we pulled
Huh.
it down. We may add it back up and have it available for firms that want to use it, but it was a Chrome extension or an Outlook extension. And as you were typing it, it almost worked like, it wasn't in real time, like you said, and I think we could get to real time, but
Was it
the
also
way that
slowing
we,
things down, like the typing?
it was slowing it down. It was catching too many things, and this was before we were really pushing like and updating the AI.
Yeah,
So
false
firms,
positives would be a nightmare there, right? If you're trying to write an email.
yeah, so firms aren't too happy about it. But I think with the improvement of the data with the LLMs and the models, I believe that that could be something. I think Brian McLaughlin is working on something like that right now. I think he has something called Humanity or something that they're trying to push around capturing emails in front of it. So as you're
Mm.
typing,
I mean, it just seems like a logical direction for a lot of these things, right? Especially on the compliance side, right? If everything is post, right, it's not as helpful. I mean, in the trading space, right, for a long time, everything was like post trade compliance, and then things got a lot better, and there was a lot more pre trade compliance and compliance monitoring tools that really made things better. And I think we're just going to see more of that in other areas, right? So it makes sense that you had something like that, and I'm sure something like that will be back again.
yeah, yeah.
Do you think compliance officers are generally bullish and optimistic about using AI tools? I mean, it seems like what you're mapping out is a future where this saves them a hell of a lot of effort and time. It makes them a lot more, productive. At the same time, I've heard of, I'm a member of the National Society of Compliance Professionals, and I spent some time with them, and a lot of folks are very concerned about AI use within their firm. So I'm just curious what kind of conversations you're having.
Yeah, there's two sides of this, right? One side is when we first launched the AI, small to medium sized market, very skeptical, didn't want to use it. All the large firms that we spoke to, that's all they wanted was AI. Yeah, make everything more efficient. We don't
Mm.
have to spend more money. We could reduce flag false positives. And then on the compliance side, compliance officers were like, this is great, but how do you prove it? Like, what if the SEC comes in? How do I show what the AI did? Right. So that I think is a big problem for a lot of firms that have AIs. Like, how do you show that? So that's one of the first things we did because we work with a lot of compliance consulting firms and they're like, you have to be able to show it. So we built into the app and it's not turned on for everyone, but firms that want to utilize it. We show this in a demo where you could actually type in sentences and phrases and comments in our models and it'll tell you whether it's compliant or not. And that's how we
Right.
trained it. That's how we trained the model or the prompts and everything in the models. It was like we hired a bunch of compliance consultants and said, you have how much data over the years of all these words and phrases and everything that constantly get flagged. I'm like, put them in our system and correct it. And that's what they did.
That's
Yeah,
really interesting.
I spoke with, I believe this was early last year. I was speaking with like a cybersecurity firm, and obviously there's crossover into compliance areas, and they were like, "Look, most of the firms that compete with us are ensuring that firms are being compliant, but very few of them help them prove it. And if you can't prove it, then you're only doing 50% of the job."
How do you know, right? It's like the saying, "Our policy is to be compliant," right?
We take the reservation. Oh, I know you know
Right.
how to take the reservation.
Classic
Can you keep
Seinfeld.
the reservation?
Well, you told Jason Pereira that you envision AI detecting financial crimes like insider trading. I mean, this is getting into Minority Report territory, but I'm just
Perfect.
curious, like, where do you see this going? I mean, do you think there will be like a trust issue at some point? I'm just curious, where do you see it going sort of 5-10 years from now?
Oh gosh, 5, 10 years from now, that's
Or
I
let's
mean,
dial
like
it back to like
we
2
might be
years.
flying
Could be
cars by then, right?
exactly. Yeah.
It's like flying cars and the hoverboard are like the one promise that
Right.
all these
Everybody
sci-fi
already
movies
freaks
gave
out.
us, right? We're gonna have Skynet before we have flying cars.
Back to the Future
So,
failed us big time.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I do. I see that there's going to be more proactiveness with AI in tools. And again, I think it's going to come down to, is it hindering or helping? Right. And if it's hindering, people will turn it off. If it's helping, they'll keep it on and continue to use it. The areas where we know that there's pain points today that we're solving for with the AI flagging and the AI agents running those random reviews, that's pretty, I wouldn't say simple, but it's a start to help compliance utilizing AI and reducing the frictions and the manual processes and time that they spend in compliance. I think we're super early and we could do so much more. And that's what really excites me about building this company because everyone's like, oh, this is like your third or fourth company. You're not a young buck anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but with AI and all these LLMs and models and the things that we could do to help things make, become more efficient and better workflows. And I'm like, we're not going to sit here and replace everybody. You have to have the human in the loop, but we're going to make it better. And that's a whole idea about building software and products is you want to make them better. And, with AI, and everything that's out there today and even more that's coming, that's where I see, with data lakes that we talked about before and AI agents and RagBots, it's going to be it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be cool. Like it's going to be easier. It's going to be fun to like work with the data versus how you have to do it today with searches and filters and everything else.
Are you guys getting into, on the employee side, are you guys getting into or already into trade compliance and employee compliance?
It's on our roadmap. And the other thing is, eh, do we want to jump into that? It's a big, task, a big build. We kind of straw manned it, like blueprinted it. We have it. It's just, do we want to take that off?
Is getting access to the broker feeds a challenge, or is it actually just the analysis of those feeds?
Depends on who you are. The good news is I have, a good clean record. I worked for Schwab before. I have a lot of friends at Schwab, Fidelity, Pershing. So we already have access to Schwab and Fidelity. But I think the easiest way to do it is to pull the data in through like a practice management system because it's all there already. And then use like Plaid or something for any outsourced or outside accounts that are coming in. But yeah, one thing I really like about the trade monitoring is every tool I've seen out there, and from what I heard, they're not that great. So I think there's definitely room for a lot of improvement there. And also from Gartner, I've seen like the CAGR on trade monitoring surveillance over the next 5 years is like 20%. So it's pretty strong.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of opportunity in that market. E-coms is around 12% CAGR over the next 5 years. So that's pretty strong as well. But the trade monitoring, I think, is something we could capture and help out with.
Yeah, I love how you're finding these opportunities. I like that young buck comment, by the way, is so ironic because I don't know if you've seen this chart of the average age of unicorn CEOs, but it's sort of in the between 40 and 50 is there's a distribution curve 50. So the idea that starting companies is a young man's game. You learn a lot from your first few companies. I'm on my fifth,
Yes.
so I am right there with you.
You definitely do. And you're always learning. You're always learning every company. You're like, man, I need to do it this way this time. And then it doesn't, it doesn't work. You're
Yeah,
like, wait a minute, what happened?
if only I'd started a podcast in my first company, things would be so different. Yeah. So, well, do you guys want to move on to Best of LinkedIn? Are you guys okay
I
with
was
that?
just going to ask that. Yes, let's talk.
Okay, let's do it. So I want to talk about Claude Cowork. So here's a LinkedIn post to kick us off. This is from Hagen McGarry, who's at California State University in San Marcos. I don't know what their mascot is, but go their mascot. Claude Cowork is a research preview inside Claude Desktop that turns chat into the do the work in my file. So Cowork, what it is, a task mode. You set an outcome, Claude creates a plan, then executes a multi-step task while showing progress. It has folder scoped access. You choose a folder, Claude can read, edit, and create files only in what you explicitly grant. So a lot more fine-tuned control. And it runs locally with isolation. So tasks execute in a virtual machine environment, but output lands directly into your file system. And it can use connectors and skills, like Claude currently has access to. So have you tried this, James?
I've
Yeah.
been mostly experimenting with it, and briefly, it's kind of like a more like user-friendly limited version of Claude Code. So for anyone who's already using Claude Code, it's almost like it's like less functionality, but a prettier, easier user interface. And you don't have to go through the process of setting up like a true code base. You don't have to set up, Git. You don't have to kind of go through the process of doing some things, but it's kind of like just using Claude Code, but made much easier. But I'll give you like a real world example, and I really do think this is kind of powerful. I take a lot of notes and I use Obsidian. For those who don't know, it's just basically like a Markdown note taker. Markdown being
It's like
a
Apple
format.
Notes, but with Markdown and some
Yeah,
more.
yeah. It's no different than an Apple Notes or Those who have been around a while in Evernote or something like that, right? The difference being that it's all in Markdown, so it's like your data, you own it. You can still sync it on the cloud, whatever. The point being, my notes get messy over time. And I actually recently did something where I kind of connected them and I built a RAG on top of all of my data. So I have my own little like knowledge base. But my vault was still kind of a mess underneath. It was still bad data. So I gave first I made a copy of my vault. I did this in test first, but I gave it a copy of my vault that had a few hundred files in it, pretty disorganized, some folders, some not, lacked metadata, which Obsidian's really good at, right? So you could have like titles, tags, created date, whatever. And I basically said, analyze this and then give me a plan for how you would clean it up. I liked its plan and it reorganized every file in my vault. It added metadata. It created templates, told me to add 2 different plugins for Obsidian that would add value for my use case, set them up, wrote documentation, put documentation in one of the folders, created a process to keep this up to date. Like it was pretty stellar. And it did all this in like
That's
half
pretty
an hour
wild.
and I didn't write a line
Yeah.
of code.
I mean, the fact that it has root access to your machine is wild and gives it
Yeah.
all these superpowers. Obviously, whatever it does gets saved locally. There's some reassurance, but I think of Claude Cowork as the white collar business version of Claude Code. Claude Code
Yeah.
is for the hoodie crowd. Claude Cowork is for the white collar crowd, right? Or the quarter zip crowd if it's Silicon
And
Valley, right?
the Chrome connector is
Yeah.
the cherry on top because
The extension, right? Yeah, the extension was interesting. And
yeah, because now
now
you
I
can
have the
do
extension running whenever I do a Claude prompt. It starts using the extension to do all sorts of stuff. And I mean, I think what I've heard from other people here who have been pretty deep in is, first of all, another sort of version of AI is the new UI. Like, why use off the shelf tools if you can just create something really quickly, or just ask something to do something really quickly, right? So that's a really interesting thing. Also, from a data security point of view, we're here talking about compliance. It makes you wonder whether you should just have a separate Mac Mini or machine to do this thing, so it can't touch your actual sensitive material because it's running stuff on its own, and you're giving it quite a bit of trust. And there are all these debates about who do you trust? Do you trust Anthropic? Do you trust Google? Do you trust OpenAI? Who do you trust more? Who might screw up, right, with a bug? We're all SOC 2 compliant, but anyone who's gone through SOC 2 compliance knows that, like, there's all sorts of stuff that could happen. So yeah, it's raised all sorts of interesting trust questions.
yeah, and I mean, if you're gonna put stuff on a separate machine, you're kind of defeating the purpose because like
Exactly.
it needs
Yeah.
access.
Yeah.
It needs access to your data to really be of value. So this is, to me, it's really like finding the right. You have 2 options, at least present day. Option 1, find and vet the right vendor, right, and sign up for the enterprise or equivalent program. Build policies around responsible and compliant AI usage. Use proper compliance tools. And option 2 is to self-host and run local, right? Host it in your own virtual private server. If you're a small business or you're a single advisor, you can download Olama, run it on your own machine. I think I have 2 or 3 different models on my Mac. They're all like smaller, but
If Claude Cowork does something illegal and you didn't know, are you at fault?
that's an interesting one. And I bet we'll find out.
Yeah, there'll be some
I just hope I'm not that.
case.
I'm this case.
There's a lot of firms out there. I don't know. I would say the majority, if not all, startups in software are using Claude or Cursor or something, right, to at least initiate the process of whatever they're building, right? Which is great because it's just helping speed up, go to market with anything that they're building, which is huge. But yeah, we'll find out what works, what's not. Something will leak somewhere, and we'll find out. Hopefully, it's not one of us that finds it out.
Yeah, I think what'll be interesting is, I mean, I'm curious. Obviously, a lot of the firms we're talking about in the financial advisor space have everything locked down, so employees aren't randomly building tools within these firms, right? But I think it'll just a matter of time until someone builds a random tool that accesses enterprise data and does something crazy, and maybe something they weren't even aware could be possible, right? And maybe it was even a good idea. To
100%.
your point, James, like it was suggesting things to you. Maybe it's actually a good idea, but it's against policy, and it's not aware of the policies, and it just goes and does something that is.
Well, so I think this, like any compliance expert I've always talked to, and the same will be probably true of cybersecurity, always tells you that like your weakest link is always the human element, right? So the best you can do is mitigate that. And that often you can only put so many guardrails in place. So assuming you're putting the guardrails in place, assuming you've written policies, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, it comes down to training and education, right? And hiring competent employees. So if you train on responsible usage, if you can give good examples of like, yeah, I can give it access to this, and we're not always going to be able to keep up on like locking things down, or we want you to use this tool, but you can only use so much of it. You have to train for that. And I think that's the most practical thing any business can do. And for the small business, it doesn't really cost money, right? Like maybe you do require an expert to come in and kind of help with that. But that might be if you're a consultant familiar with AI, I think I might have just come up with a new services business, right? Like just train on compliant uses of AI, right? Help firms understand what they can do and not do
Or
and
how to
build out policy.
use AI for compliance. Yeah, it reminds me, we have a former chief security officer from a number of large firms on our advisory board, and he keeps on reminding me that a random contractor in the Philippines could take a thumb drive and put it into a rack somewhere within AWS data center and grab a whole bunch of data, and you would probably have no idea, right? They'd lose their job, but that's probably okay considering how much they might get paid for that data. I think to your point about the human element is always hard to figure out. Should we move to rapid fire?
Yeah, let's go. Do you got one?
Well, I love underhyped, overhyped. We've been doing this.
Yeah, let's do that one.
Yeah. So yeah, just Larry, I'm curious, what trend or technology or product do you think is underhyped right now, and what do you think is overhyped?
Good question. That's a good one. Overhyped. I think there's enough AI note takers out there. I think we've kind of solved it for that. Underhyped, at least in the financial industry, is just not enough AI tools. We're not using. I think there's too much of a hesitation to use AI, and I don't know why. I'm kind of shocked by it.
Is it the compliance team blocking usage of the tools?
I think it's a number of things. I think the first thing is just not knowing what AI is and how it works. I think is the first thing, is just understanding it. And then the second thing is like, yeah, we're going to block everything until we realize like, how does it work? Can you show us what it actually does? Like, can you prove it? Right. So yeah, I think the first one more so than anything.
Yeah, I think that's a goal that they're never going to achieve. They're just going to realize at some point they're far behind. Like, at what point are they going to be like, oh, I understand AI now? Like, it's changing so fast. It's just something you have to start learning.
When they get
don't really-
replaced, they'll understand it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like the firms that are like the RA firms or the smaller asset managers that have really good CTOs or CIOs, that have like at least $1 billion in AUM or more. It seems like they really get it. But then like the smaller firms or the larger firms are like hesitant they want it. They just don't know what they want. And then they want every rule, regulation, policy around it to figure out what it is. And then the smaller firms are just like, oh, well, we'll wait until everybody else uses it.
I think the larger firms know what they want. They're thinking about AI, like at least from, you and I were both, at and talking to some people at the CTO roundtable back at Edge, and all of them are utilizing, AI in their business. And these are some of the largest wealth managers, right? And they're all using AI, but at the same time, they were talking about how they have to be careful, how certain vendors that are already approved start adding AI into their platforms, and they have to go back through the review process. So I think they're trying to adopt it. I think they're just having to go through more hoops, right? It just takes a little longer because of compliance, bureaucracy, red tape, etc. The smaller firms, I agree with you, just are kind of overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. And that $1 billion firm is like, oh, we're diving in.
Yeah.
Right?
They're all
we can
in.
move fast. We can approve things quickly. We only need to get this guy. Brad has to approve it. If Brad approves it, we can use it.
And
Right?
they get they're all in, like they have their data lakes, they're set up, they have their AI agents. And then you talk to like these larger like financial institutions, like the massive ones. And I get it because they're so big and they have so many disparate systems everywhere. Like even just with e-coms, they'll have one for email, they'll have one for social media, one for like Stone Age style, and they're trying to bring it all together. But then you talk about data lakes and they're like, I think we have Snowflake somewhere. It's like, I think we have Databricks or something. Maybe we have some Dell servers with like, I don't know. So, they want it and they want to embrace it and they're trying
Yeah.
to. It's not as easy for those massive firms, but for like the $1 billion, $10 billion RA, they're like all over it. And it's good to see.
All right, here's my rapid fire. Charles Schwab paid $10 million in the January enforcement action. Are they now a customer?
No, I wish they were.
My follow-up was going to be, should they be?
If you're
Yeah.
listening, Schwab,
They
reach
should
out.
be. We're
Yeah.
on their marketplace. We're trying to get on their affinity program right now. So yeah, they should definitely be a client.
Schwab, I don't know Larry's enterprise pricing, but I'm guessing it's under 10 million. Maybe
might be good
not.
ROI. Yeah, might be good ROI. Yeah, I'm talking to
Strong
someone
ROI.
from Schwab today. I'll put in a good word for you, Larry. But
Let's see,
I have a
big-
feeling you have good connections there.
Yeah. I'm an ex Schwabby, so yeah, I'd love to get that business.
So I'm going to go with one more, Mark. True or false? The SEC's enforcement campaign is the best thing that ever happened to Archive Intel.
Ooh,
I'd say false. I think AI is the thing the best thing that happened to Archive Intel.
Number
And
two,
now EC fines definitely helped. I'll say they definitely helped. But
yeah. I mean, I
think
think if you're selling bulletproof vests, Kevlar is a really good thing to have happen. But you also need people to be shooting each other. I guess ultimately, yeah. Do you assess if you're growing your team and you're interviewing? Do you assess AI capability in that process? Like, how do you think of that when you're bringing on new team members?
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's actually a question we do ask is like, what AI tools are you using to help your day to day as an employee, right? Because there's so many out there that, like a company like ours, we don't need to grow to 100 employees. There's so many new AI tools out there that we could grow by utilizing the best AI tools operationally that we won't have to go and hire like team and companies have in the past. So I'm trying to make sure like, yeah, we have the capital. We could go hire as many people as we want, but if AI could do it, why not just use AI and then hire a ton of people?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, so we appreciate that you took an hour out of your Thursday afternoon to take time to just, shoot the shit with Mark and I and be on the podcast here.
No, I love this. This is always fun. This is like when I see podcasts on my schedule, I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is I like I like to hear what else is out there, what people are thinking, and also talk about compliance, and because compliance is one of those things that no one really talked about before, and the SEC did help to kind of bring it to fruition, but also the new products like ours have also brought it to front and center in the space because it's always been your traditional financial planning, CRM tools, practice management tools, like things like that. And then you had, compliance start to come out. You have AI note takers now. You have new products out there that haven't been there before. And even though compliance has been there, it's really been like two companies for a long time, right? So there had to be some kind of change. There had to be some disruption there. And I'm glad that we're one of those companies that are out there making it happen. Thanks for having me on. This is fun. I enjoy this.
So are we. Well, thanks so much for coming on. And where can people learn more about you, Larry, get in touch with you, learn more about Archive Intel? Will you guys be in any conferences upcoming?
Yeah, we'll be at Future Proof Citywide coming up. We'll be at T3. We're doing a compliance roundtable in Orlando coming up at the end of February. So those are the next three that we'll be attending. And then archiveintel.com. You could find us there, schedule a demo, find out more information. Be happy to walk you through the products. And you can contact me through archiveintel.com or my LinkedIn page or larry@archiveintel.com.
Awesome.
Fantastic. And let's give a shout out to our own stuff. So you can also find us on AIforadvisorspodcast.com. We recently launched a new website or a website. So we're legit and official. So yeah, check us out there where you can subscribe, search through different episodes, previous guests, upcoming guests. So hope you check it out. And Larry, thanks so much. Really great to have you,
James. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Look
having
forward
me
to
on.
seeing what you build next. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.